Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Today, I'm in conversation with Ravi Krishnappa, Managing Partner at July Ventures. In this conversation, he talks about his career from being a developer to a venture capitalist now. He also shares the qualities and tips that have helped him, such as being insanely curious about the advantages of taking a breadth-first approach to quickly get the bigger picture, identifying one's own learning style and using that, embracing challenges, asking questions, and building on existing knowledge. Listen on. Hi, Ravi. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Thanks, Sivaguru.
So even though we've known each other for a while, I think in the interest of our listeners, I think it'll be good if we can start with your origin story, how you got associated with IT, and your career trajectory, which I know has been a lot of things that you've done. So hopefully we'll have sufficient time to go into the details. So all yours.
Yes, so some people will say too many things, right? But so Shivguru, I think, we've known each other since late 80s, I guess, 89, 90 time frame. So Tata Unisys was my first job. Tata Burroughs, I think, and then Tata Unisys was my first job. Mechanical engineer out of Bangalore University, and I was kind of recruited because if you remember those days, Tata Unisys was kind of dabbling into CAD CAM and some of the other things. So I was one of the few guys who kind of knew computers fairly well. I had done some bit of programming, although I was a mechanical engineer. And then I had done some project for Tata Unisys where they were trying to sell the CAD's 4X machines. So, in those days, computer vision was, they are the dealers. So if you remember, they had a small unit called NBU, a new business unit that was going to look at. This was before the AutoCAD Association and all of that. Right. So got into that, did a bit. So my first project was actually to port SAP, and not SAP as in the software giant SAP now, but there used to be a Fortran program called Structural Analysis Program, right, which was for CAD/CAM analysis, FEM and FEA analysis. So tried to port that to the Unix side. So that was a project, and post that I got recruited into CCD, the consultancy division. Was there, I think, till 94, so 88 to 94 was with Tata Unisys, mainly on the industry and commerce side, which was a lob that we used to have. Also, I think initially one of the few members that got involved in the Unix setup in Bangalore. Also, if you remember, Oracle was something fresh, so we were trying to set up Oracle as a practice, so got involved in that. Did some bit of work there, and then did quite a bit of work in between where I was in the US representing the business side. So although I was an mostly an account manager. That's where was my exposure to large clients for TUL in those days. I think the largest one was Catalyst. And during the course, one of the things that I had done was actually we had implemented Oracle. We were evaluating SAP and Oracle and BAN, etc., for Unisys's internal use. So then, because I was working with the implementation of Oracle financials for Unisys internally in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, it kind of got me working with that team. And that is when I think I wanted to move out. So moved out in 94 from TUL to kind of startup, probably India's very early Oracle financials, ERP consulting company. Possibly the earliest in those days, right? The ERP consulting. along with some colleagues out of Unisys EMEA and a few other people, Unisys Switzerland, etc. That was started as EWI. Our first customer was Unisys themselves. And then very quickly we came under the sights of Oracle Consulting. They didn't have an offshore presence at all. Although they had a development center in India, they had a support center, global support center they were planning in India. They didn't have a consulting center. So we then, Oracle bought out the parent company, which was based out of Switzerland. And then with that, I became the global director for Oracle's offshore consulting, executive director for global offshore consulting. That was in 94, 96. 94 we got taken over, and then 96 I became part of Oracle. So Oracle SSI is what it got relabeled to. And then we went on to almost be called as what eventually got, at the time of my exit, it was called as Oracle One or Global One, which meant that all of their remote consulting or whatever you want to call as offshore consulting was a practice that we set up globally, which meant that we had clients across the world, named accounts or otherwise, that would be serviced from India. So very, very early days of ERP consulting. Did that till 2003. Again, another, so 94 to 2003. At which time I thought it was time for me to stop being on a flight, traveling across the world, trying to do implementation. Then a few decided to move out of Oracle, and then a few of us actually got together and started India's probably earliest incubation center. So this was a time where a lot of companies were looking to set up their India global centers or India engineering centers. So we said, let's try and look at what we can do from an incubation center. And we were not even looking at the large ones, right? The large names like a Cisco or something. We were saying mid-sized companies or any startups that need incubation, that needs techno-functional business service. So we put together a small team. We were operationally involved. It was called as Erasmic. And then this was with two of my, one college colleague and somebody else that I had met on the way. So today that is known as Accel Venture Partners. So what is today the Accel VC is the precursor. So it was called as Erasmic. So 2003 started that. Very quickly, we incubated a few companies. Some of them I'm sure you would have heard of, or the viewers would have heard of. We incubated Newware, we incubated Mu Sigma, we incubated a few other companies those days. When I say incubated, we did some of them, like Mu Sigma was a pure startup. So we were trying to figure out how to help and how to create that go-to-market structure. Some of them were in services like Newware, where they were trying to acquire a large financial services company. So some of us played, I was a fractional CTO for some time until they brought that in. So I guess at that time I said, at that time, Accel was also trying to move to the VC side. There were indications that we would look at fund management per se. I had just moved out of Oracle. Didn't want to go back into pure fund management. I wanted to be more hands-on, working with startup. So one of the other companies that we had incubated was a company that was set up with a few friends of, some of them were ex-starters, one of them is ex-ITC. This was in a supply chain consultancy company. So it was called Inatech. So I helped start Inatech in India, build that up. So 2003 to 2008, 2008, we ran it independently. We then became very quickly in those 6 years, we became Europe's largest supply chain specialty company. This was a time where you had Euro coming in, and you had the whole cross-border issues associated with Euro. We were just past the Y2K, so there was a lot of consolidation happening on the services side. Built a few solutions, global consolidation, etc. on the supply chain side, and eventually sold it to a company called, sold it to the US-based company, and I was there till 2010, exited 2010. So this is like 20 years already in the industry, doing multiple things. For the 5 years beyond that, almost 4 or 5 years, I had enjoyed working with startups. So, and at that time, I had actually already dabbled into a bit of angel investment. So decided to pursue that, not for anything else, but I thought I wanted to do something that I thought was fun, right? And financially, I was stable enough having sold. So I thought, let me do something else. So did a whole series of investments. So that was my, formal investment structure. Although we had done some bit in early 2006 time. 2010, 2011 to 2014, 2015 is where I did about, I used to do one investment every quarter. And the idea was, get involved, understand the business, work with the team, see how that works. And it brought me two things which I always cherished, which is a new challenge every time and a great learning experience, right? Every time you go to a startup, you have to kind of become an expert in that area in less than 6 months to be able to hold your fort. So did that. So did about 12, 16 investments in those 3-4 years. Some of it were individual, where I put in my own money. Not a great deal of money. This would typically be between 15 to 30 lakhs or 40 lakhs. That would be each investment. But some of it also through networks like Indian Angel Network. So at one time, a few of us almost were taking leads in most of the IN deals that were taking place. So if I were to think of the kind of names that you would have heard over the period of time, some of them I still hold in my portfolio. So I was invested in things like Dhruva, which is a unicorn now. Invested in Unifor, which is also a unicorn. Orangescape, which is in a different name now, run by Suresh Sambadam. So very early SaaS companies, even including B2C companies or marketplaces like Stazilla, etc. So did about 12, 15 investments. At that time, what happened was around 2015, 2016, it started, in some ways, it started to get to, there are a lot of people coming in and saying, everybody was saying that they can help with investors and work through. And at which time I said, okay, I have enough on my plate. I didn't want to take on newer piece. So started to focus on one side. There was one thing that I was very interested in, which was education. I've always been passionate about education. So, started something called Science Adda, which was a startup we put together on how to reimagine hands-on education for school students. And this went all the way where we almost created a parallel syllabus. Then, because I had that background, helped create some programs for the government in those days. There was something called Tod for Jod, which is a concept that we put together to say at home you'll find things, like a old telephone or old remote control. How do you learn something by taking it apart and putting something together, right? Take a old remote and then you can see that it could be a mechanical item, it could be old speaker set, old anything that is usually has some electronics component, some old game box and things like that. Created a whole set of syllabus for that. And then also started to work with some of the startups in a more in-depth manner, right? Rather than being a fractional piece, providing advice, getting deeper and deeper into that. So spent a bit of time with a company called AceBot, which was kind of ahead of its time. Very early chatbot. So if you hear of all the people talking about NLP-led chatbots with ChatGPT, etc., that's something that we tried doing very early.
Okay.
registered that we were very early players with a partnership with Slack, for example, and those kinds of things. Kind of came up to the COVID period. Obviously, some of these took a huge beating. Science Adda, which was offline model where you would actually go and do experiences in schools. I had a receivable of a large amount, almost 60 plus lakhs that we had to get, and then there was no visibility to whether we would get that. There was no visibility to having 3 years of no business, etc. So we had to reconstruct, restructure some of them, shut down some of them, get a few others to a safe landing place. So did all that during the COVID time, also trying to help the anti-COVID cause. So this kind of took a whole space, right, up and down and up and down. At which time we said, the COVID helps, at least helped in a way where a few of us sat back and reflected upon what is it that we want to spend the next decade on, right? What's your real value add? So I had moved out from being an entrepreneur to an investor, and then being a fractional entrepreneur of some kind or a fractional CEO of some kind. So then kind of realization to say that, your ability to work with fresh ideas, a new team, a more energetic team is what gives you that joy, which is when we said, okay, let's set up a fund. So today, what do? I am part of July Ventures. There are 5 partners. We set up a small fund during COVID time. This is a sub 100 crore fund. We are a SEBI approved fund, investing only in B2B startups, what we call as technology platforms or digital platforms. We are almost completely deployed in the last 2 years with that, putting together a larger fund with my partners. This fund, we just got an approval from SEBI. It's going to be a 1,000 crore fund, 800 plus 200 crores. And the intention is, learn as you start investing. But we are structured. The point I think I would like to make is that, once you're an entrepreneur or once you have handled this piece, you can never get off the bus, right? So we are structured, the new fund is structured in a way where we are operative VCs, which means we have a specialist who's a technology specialist, we have a financial specialist, some of them are strategy. So we work with hand in hand with or shoulder to shoulder with the startups.
Wow. I think if I started writing down all these names, I think that itself will be a good directory of how the Bangalore ecosystem has grown.
Very long-winded answer, but I think it's that.
Yeah, wonderful. So the first question that comes to mind, which also we get quite often, is that from having a job, that to a technical job, an engineering kind of a mindset, to whether it is the partnership that you mentioned with Oracle or with the Swiss organization, all those things, and taking that plunge to be an entrepreneur. How did you first discover that aptitude in yourself? Or does it require, can that be trained? Or if there's a lot of people who say that I don't know whether I'm making a difference. I've been doing this, all this is fine, this text, but then I want to really do something else.
So I don't know if it's so the essence of your question is it nature or nurture, I guess, right? In some ways.
In a way, yeah, in a way.
In a way, right? No, I think it's a bit where you have to kind of take an anchor and build on it. So I think if I were to go back and say what is it, I'm insanely curious, Shiv. If you want to go back and say what in my mind, what do I think has started all of this is I've been insanely curious, right? When I say insanely curious, it's at times I get people to say, well, I don't stop asking the question why, right? And that is a huge piece. So I think you have to go figure out. And other than being curious, I think I've been mostly a breadth person. I'm not been the kind of guy, maybe attributed to a lack of attention span. I'm not in today's terms where it is very short, but yeah, over a couple of years, I've worked at something, I've figured something out, right? I'm not the 10-year research paper kind of person. Right. I think it's important to understand what your own nature is. In that sense, the nature question is there, right? And the nurture answer comes beyond that. How do you nurture that curiosity? So if you remember, one of the pieces that I've always figured out is that engineering guys were not supposed to know anything about finance, right? If you remember, none of us, we were always asked, right? And in those days, if you remember, I'll give you some specific examples in data analysis, right? Once I kidded Saurabh Srivastava on this much later, about 10, 15 years ago after we did this. So one of those CCD sessions in SEEPS, he actually came in and talked about how Tata Unisys, some of us had stock options. They had just gone public. So he talked about how the companies performed. I asked about some performance question. And at that time, I didn't own TUL stock. So he said, you're an employee, not a shareholder. That's a question that should be raised by a shareholder. So you have these kind of stuff, right? And then the other thing that I remember was, Catalyst in those days was one of our largest customers, right? $1 million customer. And at one time they had a cash flow issue. And I don't even know if you know this. Gopal probably knows this. They were falling back on some payments, right? So I went in and I talked to them and said, hey, what can we do? I mean, is there anything? So if you remember, we used to transfer all of it, and we used to have a 64K line or something. In those days, it was costing 12 or 14 lakhs, which is a significant amount of money, right, for that piece. So his point was that I'll give you some share, or talk to your folks back in India. We'll give you some shares, or we'll give you something else. Can you take part of the cost, right? And we had upwards of, I think, 50 people working on that project, and I very enthusiastically created a business case, came back into India, met, I think, Vijay Srirangan was running the ops at those days. I made a business case. I went and pitched it. He said, focus on what you have to do, which is the project. Don't worry about this. Some of these, I think, ended up as being a challenge. I said, in hindsight, if eventually Catalyst sold that out to SAP. So I forever will tell people that if we had taken the shares at that time, TUL would have been much more, much richer than what it got through the services, or much more pieces that made through the services. So I think that business bent of mine was always there. I think the turning point came out, or I've had two turning points. So to go back and specifically answer, what made me work with this team to say, let's put a business structure together is probably one of TUL's earliest plug-in software. I don't know if you know this, right? When Oracle applications was being deployed, all these guys in Unisys had a printer next to them. But because it was running on the mainframe, on the Unix mainframe, if they had to take a accounts payable report or accounts receivable, they couldn't take it on the printer next to them, connected to the PC. You had to send it to the print queue, which was, whether it was a CP2K or whatever else. You had to send it to the print queue, and then you had to go to the print room and take a printout. Right? Okay. Very, very. And this is where you had a global financials running out of Egan in Minneapolis, and then you had to queue a print queue and set up for everything, right? Just absolutely ridiculous from an ERP kind of a perspective. So again, the team in people, I think, who was the guy? Balu, I think, built this, right? We did the first piece where we said, let's put a printer driver that is a patch on, and it would sit on the other side.
Okay.
It would actually take the print stream and print it locally onto your the printer connected to the machine, right? And this is the first license deal we did with Unisys EMEA. And this is Tata Unisys selling, I think, about 3,000 licenses at between $5 or $10 each, something to Unisys EMEA. And we had a license agreement that we would do about another 10,000 licenses. They could resell it, etc. But after I left, I don't think that moved anywhere. We just dropped it off. But I think these are instances. I think all of us have these opportunities. It's your I think your ability to go back and pick one of this and get to a stage where saying, look, I could have done so much better if I were in control end to end. I think that's what prompted me to get into the entrepreneurship side. And then, the story continues as you go through it, various pieces.
Another related point that you mentioned is that one of the things that you had to do was to learn new domains quickly. Right. So what is your secret or any tips for this accelerated learning? I asked him for tips and stories related to entrepreneurship, paying it forward, or giving back. The answers to such questions and more in the next episode. Don't miss it.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.